Shelley Gold presents Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Homosexuality Acceptance Differs Between Military Installations. I am going to try and explain how the policy Don't Ask, Don't Tell and its repeal have changed homosexuality acceptance on one military installation compared to other installations now that homosexuals are free to be open about their sexuality. For my research, I have decided to look at 3 different installations. They are Fort Drum, New York, Fort Benning, Georgia, and Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and transgender, also known as LGBT, makes up 2% of the military's 2.2 million forces on active duty, reserves, and National Guard. This accounts for 44,000 soldiers. New York has a 3.8% population of adults who identify themselves as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, which is roughly 743,678 people. Fort Drum, as of 2010, had a population of 12,955. The percentage of family households and households with unmarried partners totaled 89.9%. The homosexual household that were counted as self-reported same-sex unmarried partner households was 0.2% of all households for lesbian couples and 0.4% of all households for gay men. Roughly 70 homes are homosexuals. Georgia has a 3.5% of adults who identify themselves as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, which is roughly 347,198 people. Fort Benning, as of 2010, had a population of 11,177 people. The percentage of family households and households with unmarried partners totaled 86%. Likely homosexual households for lesbian couples was 0.2% and 0.1% for gay men. Roughly 29 households are homosexuals. Kentucky has a 3.9 population of adults who identify themselves as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, which is roughly 170,836 people. Fort Campbell, as of 2010, had a population of 13,685 people. The percentage of family households and households with unmarried partners totaled 97.4%. Likely homosexual households for lesbian couples was 0.4% and 0.2% for gay men. Roughly 80 households are homosexual. During the period of 1998 to 2003, there were 6,273 soldiers discharged from the military under DADT. 2,101 are unknown. From Fort Drum, 40 soldiers were discharged, which is roughly 1%. From Fort Benning, 87 soldiers were discharged, which is roughly 2%. From Fort Campbell, 502 soldiers were discharged, which is roughly 12%. What does this mean? New York has the highest population of homosexuals, the second highest homosexuals in the military, and the lowest amount of discharges because of DADT. Kentucky, with the lowest population of homosexuals, has the highest amount of homosexuals in the military and the highest amount of discharge because of DADT. Georgia is in between New York and Kentucky with population of homosexuals and discharges, but has the lowest amount of homosexuals in the military. On September 20th, 2011, DADT was repealed, allowing homosexuals to be open if they choose to. This statistics shows, in general, gay people disclose their sexual orientation selectively. Statistics have shown that 32% have revealed their sexual orientation within the first year after the repeal, which means about 14,080 soldiers have become open. So what is causing the other 29,920 soldiers from revealing their sexual orientation? One explanation, as one soldier puts it, is he will not come out until his family can receive benefits. For some soldiers on Fort Drum, that may not be an issue. The Department of Defense formally recognized same-sex spouses of service members. One couple, Private First Class Christine N. Kessling and her wife Nicole L. Kessling, are out in the open about their sexuality. Private First Class Kessling was able to get her wife an ID card and sign her up for TRICARE. Between Kentucky, Georgia, and New York, one factor that contributes to revealing one's sexual orientation is the state itself. New York, out of the 3 states, is the only one to legalize same-sex marriages by state legislature. New York also recognizes marriages of same-sex couples from other jurisdictions. It protects employees in private sector from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. The state law also protects employees of state and local governments from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. But this is a problem for states that do not allow same-sex marriages. Kentucky and Georgia both have a ban on same-sex marriage by constitutional amendment and state law since 2004. Georgia does not have laws for homosexual relationships or within the workplace. In Kentucky, the only difference is an executive order that was signed which protects government employees from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. With the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, homosexuals in the military cannot be discharged on the basis of their sexual orientation. However, this does not change the views of fellow soldiers. Whether they have a problem or not with someone being homosexual, it can make the soldier's life who chose to come out complicated or easy. Soldiers say that living a double life was difficult to do because they could not be themselves at work and didn't want to jeopardize their career. Given the chance to be open about themselves is a weight off their shoulders. But there are factors contributing to one not revealing their sexual orientation. For one, if they do reveal their sexual orientation, they could be blackmailed, manipulated, their personal relationships could suffer, their relationship with other units could be strained, they could be teased or mocked or even threatened or injured by other service members. Those who have chose to come out to their units and others say there is no change in how people react towards them. As for others, it isn't as pleasant. Some of these factors take into account the hardships they must now face. For example, in 1999, Barry Winchell was murdered by a fellow soldier because of his sexual orientation in Kentucky. Fort Drum soldier Bradley Manning stated he was mocked, harassed, and even endured physical attacks from other soldiers. So just because DADT is repealed does not change the views of individuals. A factor that determines whether someone may or may not come out could be the state. New York is a Democratic state, whereas Kentucky and Georgia are Republican states. Comparing Fort Drum and Fort Campbell, they both have 0.6% of their population who claims themselves as lesbians or gays. What makes these two bases different from one another? For one, New York allows same-sex marriage, while Kentucky bans same-sex marriages. Kentucky also has a history of low tolerance of homosexuality. Kentucky has the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, written in their constitution, and 75% of the voters approve it. Georgia has 48% who favor gay marriage and 43% who oppose it. There were no negative effects of the military because of the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. In fact, it cost roughly $53,000 for each service member's dismissal under DADT between 2004 and 2009.
In conclusion, there are factors that contribute to the acceptance of homosexuality on military installations. One major factor was, of course, the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Military installations cannot discharge someone based on their sexual orientation. Another factor is if the state that base is in has legalized or banned same-sex marriages and their laws on homosexuals. If the state has a higher tolerance acceptance of homosexuals, the state that are accepting give them more rights and treat them as equals compared to a state that does not accept them. A final factor that contributes is one's peers on that military installation. If people surrounding you are supportive and accepting of your lifestyle, it makes a person's life easier, whereas those who have negative views on homosexuality can make life difficult. People are the key factor to acceptance. A military installation trains the same way. They do their jobs the same way. The views of people on that military installation determine how accepting they are